Who's the better president? Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we're going to be comparing the incumbent president Joe Biden to the former president Donald Trump, and we're going to be giving them both letter grades on each topic and each issue in American politics, regarding American politics, whether it's the economy, abortion rights, climate change, immigration, foreign policy, you name it. We're going to be grading them and comparing them. Basically, we're going to be comparing and giving them letter grades, F at the worst and A at the best. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give both Biden and Trump an overall grade to determine who is better overall based off of the issues. So I'm going to be giving them both grades on every single issue, or actually most issues regarding American politics. First issue we're going to be starting off with today's video is foreign policy. I'm going to rate Donald Trump's 4 years of foreign policy a solid B, while Biden's term obviously is not finished, but we're nearing the end of his first term, so we've seen most of it. I'm going to rate Joe Biden a C- on foreign policy. Now let's start off with Joe Biden. So Joe Biden, the reason why I grade him a little bit lower than Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy, number one, is because under the Trump administration, we have never had a war. Compare that to Joe Biden. Under the Biden administration, we have a war and tensions with China is rising. Did we ever have tensions with China under Donald Trump? Yes, but they were not as bad as what's going on with Joe Biden's administration. And also, one thing to keep in remind, that Donald Trump could be underrated, actually, when it comes to foreign policy, because he was the first president, and you guys need to be reminded on this, and come back to this video on November 5th of 2024 when you go to vote, and you show up to the voting area where you go to vote. Come back to this video, because Donald Trump is the first ever president in American history to step foot in North Korea. Keep in mind. And Joe Biden, North Korea does not even want to discuss or negotiate with Joe Biden. And under Donald Trump, Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump talked face to face. And not only that, it was way more. Trump stepped foot in North Korea, the first president to ever do so. So actually, arguably could be higher than a B for Donald Trump. So he's kind of underrated when it comes to foreign policy. But I think Trump is very good under foreign policy, because he was the first president ever to step foot in North Korea. No president has ever done that. So when it comes to foreign policy, I would slightly rather have Trump in charge of foreign policy rather than Joe Biden, because number one, we never had a costly war under the Trump administration. Now we have war with Russia under Biden's administration. So Russia was very quiet under the Trump administration, is what I'm saying. And tensions with China wasn't as bad with Trump as it is with Biden. So when it comes to foreign policy, I'm going to give Joe Biden a C- and Donald Trump a B. And Donald Trump was also the first to step into North Korean territory, and Biden could never. He just can't, because they don't even. Biden has no relationship with Kim Jong-un whatsoever, and that pretty much would sum up why Trump is better in foreign policy than Joe Biden. So Trump is going to beat Biden when it comes to foreign policy, and that's just the first issue. The next is the economy. I'm going to give Donald Trump a B+ for the economy and Joe Biden a D- for the economy. So, main reason why I have Joe Biden so low when it comes to the economy, obviously it's hurting and it's affecting negatively every single American, and we can all feel it. And we all know this. Inflation has gone to a 40-year high, and gas, as part of inflation, has risen in every single state. Gas under the Trump administration, for some states, not every state, but for some, were just at $1. Gas was $1 for some states under the Trump administration. And the cheapest gas you can find nowadays with the Biden administration is probably $3 to $4. That's the cheapest you can find with Biden. And the average is like $5 in every state with the Biden administration. But the average for gas prices with the Trump administration was like, $2 to $3. And it got even to the point where it was $1 for gas with the Trump administration. So when it comes to gas prices, Donald Trump handles that well because they were cheaper under Trump than Biden. What we can also You can also bring in the fact that we have this war with Russia and Ukraine, and that's obviously going to affect inflation. You can also count that in as well. But I mean, other than the war in Ukraine, that is affecting gas prices. You can say that, but also Biden does. You can argue that that Biden is to blame for the gas price, and you can argue otherwise. But let's keep in mind, folks, that we cannot forget that that gas was around $1 and $2 under Trump, and now it's at $5 average and $7 in some other states. So gas inflation is definitely worse under Biden than it is to Donald Trump, and every American is feeling it. And also, under the Trump administration, stocks were definitely doing way better and they were higher, and with the Biden administration, it's looking otherwise. So when it comes to the economy, I'd rather have Donald Trump handle that than Joe Biden. So next issue, climate change. I actually prefer Biden to handle climate change than Donald Trump. First of all, Joe Biden signed the infrastructure bill. I mean, it's expensive, obviously, and that's what Republicans in Congress were arguing, that it was just too expensive, and they were arguing that it's useless and they're just wasting a bunch of money. Well, when it comes to climate change, I'm going to give Joe Biden a solid B, and this is one of those issues where I actually prefer Biden than Trump, is climate change. And Donald Trump is going to get a C minus. I don't think Donald Trump did that much to help the climate. I just don't think so. I don't think Donald Trump focused on that in his 4 years. I don't think he really cared for the climate change. So with that being said, I'm going to give Trump a C minus. I don't think he did really anything to help climate change. And Joe Biden obviously focusing a lot on climate, more than Donald Trump, and helping Americans, whether you believe that infrastructure bill is helping or not Americans. I think Biden has focused a lot more on climate change than with Donald Trump. So Biden's getting a B on climate change and Trump's getting a C minus. And when it comes to abortion, this is controversial, and I'm not going to give both Biden or Trump a grade. I'm just going to state my opinion. I think it should go back to the states. I do not agree with a full ban. I do not. As more than half of Americans are already pro-choice, including Republicans. I also do not agree on full protection of Roe v. Wade. I think they should not get full protection. Now, I think it should go back to the states. I think the states should decide, and it depends on which state you live in. And I think that's how it should go. I do not think it should be banned fully on a federal level, with the assets of exceptions of rape and incest. And I also do not think that it should be protected up to 9 months or 8 months. And some argue Republicans up until birth, which I don't know if that's really true. But when it comes to late-term abortions, I think that is very dangerous, and I actually somewhat disagree with that, but that's all I'm going to say for now. So I think it should go back to the states. Quick way to sum it up. Let's move on to the next topic. I'm not going to grade neither of them on this. Pretty controversial, hot topic. And next issue is gun control. On the issue of gun control, I actually think Biden does do a better job than Donald Trump. Not saying Biden ever did something to stop gun violence, but I'm going to give Donald Trump a C+ for his handling on gun violence in America for his 4 years in office. I'm going to give Joe Biden a B-. Not like the reason why I'm ranking Biden higher than Donald Trump when it comes to gun violence in America and gun control is I prefer Biden because the worst mass shooting in American history, and some people forget this. Keep in mind, you should remember this. The worst mass shooting in American history happened under the Donald Trump administration. So when it comes to handling gun violence in America, I prefer Biden than Trump. The worst mass shooting happened under Donald Trump. And Donald Trump obviously did go meet with some of the victims, and he obviously helped them. So it's not like he's getting this fat F or even a D. I think he should be average. I think Donald Trump is average when it comes to preventing gun violence. I will give him a C+. I mean, but when it comes to, buying an AR-15 or whatever you want to call it, not just an AR-15, any other assault rifle or whatever, I feel like we need stricter background checks. I think people with mental disabilities should not be allowed to get a gun, because under the Donald Trump administration, and still up today with the Biden administration, people with mental disabilities are still somehow getting guns, and they are using it in mass shootings. And a lot of these a lot of these school shooters or mass shooters have mental disabilities. And why are they allowed to get guns? I believe you should have stricter background checks, and I think they should raise the age from 18 to 21 to purchase a firearm. So I actually do agree with some of the policies that Joe Biden is implementing on gun control. I agree it should be raised from 18 to 21. And I also think that getting an AR-15 should not be 100% fully banned, but I think it should be restricted for only certain people can have them. And what I mean by only certain people is, if you want to buy an AR-15, you must be 21 and older, and background checks need to be implemented more stricter, and you also cannot have a mental disability. Anybody who has a mental disability cannot purchase any gun, in my opinion. So there you guys go. That's my stance on gun control. I think it's a major problem in America, and it's way too common nowadays, and people need to start taking fast action on this, because there's mass shootings every other week now, and it's way too often, and it's way too predictable, and we don't want mass shootings to be predictable and way too often. That's just not what we want. And I don't think Donald Trump, I mean, he's obviously pro Second Amendment, I have no problem with that, but he's lacking Donald Trump is lacking when it comes to preventing gun violence. I mean, he really is. So I think we need stricter background checks, and I don't fully agree with 100% ban on an AR-15. I think it just should be restricted. So, and I think in order to get a gun, you got to be 21 and up, because a lot of these mass shooters are like 18, and like some people even buy them on their 18th birthday and then go shoot up a school. That's how it pretty much is. So on the issue of gun control, I slightly prefer Biden. So next up is immigration. I'm going to give Joe Biden a D+. I think what's happening in the border right now is horrible. I think the Biden administration is horrible when it comes to handling the border. He never visits the border, actually. It's always Kamala Harris. And when she does it, she barely does it as well. So when it comes to handling the southern border between Mexico, when it comes to immigration, Joe Biden is horrible at that. So I'm going to give him a D+. And I don't think Donald Trump was amazing when it comes to immigration, but I would obviously slightly prefer him over Biden. I'm going to give Donald Trump a B-. I think Donald Trump, when it comes to the Trump administration during immigration, Donald Trump promised to build this border wall, which he claims if he would have got reelected, it would have been finished 3 weeks after he got reelected in January of 2020. So Donald Trump claimed that if he was reelected, he would have finished that border wall 3 weeks after he got reelected in 2020, which actually he was supposed to build way more wall than he actually did. So that, and he keep in mind, he also promised that Mexico would pay for it, and guess what? They did not. The United States ended up paying for that wall and wasting all that. Well, I'm not saying wasting, but spending all that money, if you know what I mean. So Donald Trump definitely had flaws when it comes to that border wall, as he was supposed to build more. He overestimated himself, and he was supposed to build more wall, which did not end up happening. Which you could also, you know, you can also say that he did not get reelected, which prevented him from finishing that wall, which is true. But he was supposed to have more wall than he actually did, and he also had a lot of flaws where Mexico was supposed to pay for it and they did not. So Donald Trump definitely had a lot of flaws when it comes to the border, don't get me wrong. And a lot of these drugs and trafficking are not just coming through the border, they're coming from underground in the tunnels. And I think Donald Trump mainly focused on the border, which is obviously the main cause of what's going on. Mostly everybody is coming through the border, but a lot of the illegal activity, I mean, is coming through the border, but they're also coming through other stuff in a lot of ways underground. Like I just mentioned, they found underground tunnels filled with drugs, and I feel like Donald Trump need to I would say he should have looked deeper into that, not just focusing on the border, because a lot of these illegal stuff are coming from, a lot of other ways. And I definitely feel like the border was more secure under Donald Trump than it is with Joe Biden, don't get me wrong, and I definitely feel like the streets have been way safer under Donald Trump than it was with Joe Biden. If you live anywhere near the border, I feel like the streets were definitely more cleaner. And when it comes to Joe Biden, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to rank him low when it comes to immigration. He's really done a horrible job. He avoids to visit the border. He just avoids to visit the border because he knows it's a disaster. And people are dying out here. People are seeking asylum. And Joe Biden does not care one bit. You know why? Because he doesn't visit. He doesn't visit and talk with these people who want asylum. He just doesn't care about them. He's going to leave them to die. So, that's where we're at with immigration. So, the overall grade. Total, I'm going to give Joe Biden's administration a 6.1 out of 10, which is a D minus. And I'm going to give Donald Trump's 4 years as president for his first term a 7.8 out of 10, a C plus. So, that's where I'm out here. Based off of every issue we went on in, I prefer Donald Trump slightly above Joe Biden. 7.8 out of 10 for Trump, C plus, and a 6.1 out of 10, D minus for Joe Biden. So, this is my overall grade on where I have these two people heading into 2024. So, that's where I grade both Biden and Trump on these issues. Let me know if you agree with my grades, and let me know if you agree with the overall grade. And who do you prefer heading into 2024, Biden or Trump? And when you do go to vote in 2024, if you are allowed to, come back to this video. Make sure you do come back to this video, and that will help you. I would hope to assume it will help you decide if you are an undecided voter on who to vote for. So there you guys go. This is where I rank these people, Biden and Trump, on these issues. And yeah, let me know if you agree with the ratings.